Sorry, Clara locked herself in the backyard. All right. But I can recognize the answer-backer symptoms. When was she first rude? Yesterday afternoon, right after school. She was rude to dear Miss Crabtree, her teacher. And when I sent her to her room, she made this hideous face and said, "I'll do it because I want to, not because you tell me to." Mrs. Pigglewiggle, she walks in such a way that her braids twitch, and even her back looks rude. Mrs. Pigglewiggle said, "Don't worry, Miss O'Toole. Some of the most charming children I know were once answer-backers. Fortunately, Mary has only just begun, so she can be cured in no time at all. You drop by here after lunch and I will give you Penelope Parrot to keep for a while. Mrs. Garrison has been using Penelope, but she's had her for a month now, and Gary should be cured by this time. Now don't worry, Mrs. O'Toole. Penelope is a cure for even the most stubborn cases of answer-backishness." Mrs. O'Toole hung up the phone and she felt much better. Right after lunch, she went down to Mrs. Pigglewiggle's house and got Penelope. Penelope Parrot was a large, cross-looking green bird who blinked rapidly. Mrs. Pigglewiggle said as she handed the cage to Mrs. O'Toole, "Fortunately for you, Penelope will only talk to children." During the walk home from Mrs. Pigglewiggle's house, Penelope was quiet, in a very cross, blinky-eyed sort of way. And when Mrs. O'Toole hung her cage in the kitchen, she hunched down and put her head under her wing. But when Mary came in from school, Penelope woke up and began preening her feathers. Mary was delighted with Penelope. She said, "Oh, Mother, I've always wanted a parrot. Do you think she can talk?" Mrs. O'Toole said, "She hasn't said a word since I brought her home, but I was told she speaks only to children." Mary said, "Where did you get her, Mother? Is she for me? May I have her in my room for my very own?" Her mother said, "I'm keeping her for a friend of mine, but when you play in your room, you may hang her cage by the window." Mary brought her milk and cookies over by Penelope's cage and was very surprised when Penelope blinked and said rudely, "Gimme a bite, pig." Mary broke off a piece of the cookie and poked it through the bars of the cage. Penelope snatched it and said, "Thanks, pig." Mary turned to her mother. "She's certainly not very polite, is she?" Her mother said, "Perhaps she has been around rude people. After all, she's only a parrot and repeats what she hears." Penelope blinked her eyes and said, "Oh, yeah? Oh, yeah?" Mrs. O'Toole looked a little shocked, but Mary laughed and said, "May I bring the children in to see her, Mother? May I?" Before Mrs. O'Toole could answer, Penelope began hopping up and down, blinking and yelling. "Say, are you the boss around here? Are you the boss around here? Are you the boss around here?" Mary's mother said, "I am the boss around here, Penelope, and if you are not more courteous, I will put a cloth over your cage." Penelope blinked and muttered. Mary bounced up and down excitedly. "What will that do, Mother? What will that do to Penelope?" Mrs. O'Toole said, "If I put a cloth over her cage, she will think that it is night and go to sleep." Penelope squawked, "I'll do it because I want to, not because you tell me to." Mary was certainly surprised at that, because she thought that she had made up that brilliant remark. She didn't dare look at her mother, so she put on her sweater and went out to find her playmates. Pretty soon she came back with 5 little friends, and they spent the afternoon standing around Penelope's cage and laughing at her rude remarks. This worried Mrs. O'Toole. If Mary thought Penelope was so amusing, then perhaps she would imitate her and become ruder than ever. So she called Mrs. Pigglewiggle. She said in a low voice so the children in the kitchen would not hear, "Mrs. Pigglewiggle, I'm rather worried because although Penelope is very rude to the children, they don't mind at all. Mary thinks she's very funny and she laughs at everything she says." Mrs. Pigglewiggle said, "Just remember, Mrs. O'Toole, that this is only the first day with Penelope. Let Mary be with her as much as she wishes. Keep Penelope's cage in the breakfast nook when Mary eats her lunch and breakfast in the dining room at night. When Mary eats her lunch and breakfast, and keep her in the dining room at night. Hang her cage in Mary's bedroom when she goes up there to play, and have Penelope sleep in Mary's room. I'm sure that you do not have to worry. Penelope has never failed me." Mrs. O'Toole said, "All right, Mrs. Pigglewiggle, I'll do as you say. Goodbye." Just before dinner, Mrs. O'Toole said to Mary, "Mary, dear, send your little friends home now. It's time for you to set the table." Mary turned to her mother and began pulling down her mouth, squinting her eyes and blinking. But before she could say a word, Penelope yelled out, "Say, who's the boss around here? Who's the boss around here anyways?" Mary's mother quickly put a cloth over her cage, politely asked the children to leave, and sent Mary in to set the table. When Mr. O'Toole came home from the office, she took the cover off again to show him the parrot, and she hung Penelope in the dining room window. After dinner, Mary's daddy said, "Up on your toes, Miss Molly O'Toole," and scooped the dishes out to the kitchen. Mary pulled down her mouth, squinted up her eyes, blinked her eyes, but Penelope said, "What am I, a servant? Work, work, work. What am I, a servant? Say, who's the boss around here?" Mary's daddy laughed so hard that the tears ran down his cheeks, but Mary stuck her tongue out at Penelope, who bounced around yelling, "Only snakes stick out their tongues." Mary pulled her tongue in quickly and shut her lips together tight. My, but she thought Penelope was horrid. Mrs. O'Toole hung Penelope's cage in Mary's room, and Penelope squawked and made so much noise that Mary finally said, "Oh, be quiet." And Penelope blinked and said, "I'll do it because I want to, but not because you tell me to. I'll do it because I want to, and not because you tell me to." Mary flounced into bed and turned off the light. The next morning, Mary was very slow. She could not find one of her socks, and she couldn't button her dress. And finally, her mother called, "Mary, hurry! Breakfast is waiting." Mary pulled down her mouth, squinted her eyes, and said, "Oh, hurry, hurry, hurry. Hurry yourself." Penelope had been preening her tail feathers, but when she heard Mary, she jerked her head up and said, "Oh, hurry, hurry, hurry. Hurry yourself, slowpoke. Hurry yourself, slowpoke. Hurry, slowpoke. Hurry, slowpoke. Hurry, hurry, hurry." Mary said crossly, "Oh, be quiet, Penelope." Penelope said, "I'll do it because I want to, but not because you tell me to. Say, who's the boss around here? Oh, yeah? Oh, yeah?" Mary ran downstairs to the breakfast table, leaving Penelope still shouting. But Mrs. O'Toole ran upstairs and got Penelope and hung her cage by the kitchen window. When the children called for Mary and Mrs. O'Toole said, "Hurry, dear, you will make your friends late for school," Mary pulled down her mouth, squinted up her eyes, and blinked, but before she could even say a word, Penelope squawked, "I'm the one who's eating this breakfast, madam. Hurry, hurry, hurry. That's all I hear. Hurry yourself, slowpoke." Mary was ashamed to look at her mother, so she rushed off without kissing her goodbye. Penelope yelled after her, "Hurry, slowpoke, the bell's ringing." Mary came home from school that afternoon. She kissed her mother and said, "Mother, I apologized to Miss Crabtree today, and she said that next week I may be monitor for the scissors." Penelope yelled, "Who said so? Who said so? Who's the boss? Who's the boss?" Mary turned to Penelope and said, "You are a very rude bird, and if you don't hush it right now, I will put a cloth over your cage." Penelope blinked and said, "Hush, hush, hush." Here's a picture. That's all I hear. I'll do it because I want to and not because you tell me to. Who's the boss around here anyways? Mary's mother said, "I'm the boss, and I think that it is time you went home, Penelope." Mary, would you like to return Penelope to Mrs. Pigglewiggle? Mary said, "Oh, yes, Mother. And may I stay and play?" Mary O'Toole said, "I think you had better come home and practice. Your music lesson is tomorrow, you know." Mary started to draw down her mouth, squint up her eyes, and blink. But suddenly she looked at Penelope, and so she turned up her mouth, opened her eyes, and smiled. She said, "All right, Mother, I'll come right home after I return that rude Penelope." And chapter 4 for tomorrow is called The Selfishness Cure. All right, guys, I'll see you tomorrow.